Hi there, my name is John Stevens. I'm pastor of Zion Lutheran Church in Oregon City, Oregon, and we're part of the ELCA. And welcome to Dollar Store Children's Sermons, where we take a look at the lectionary texts and we tie them, to something in the garage, in the backyard, kids' room, junk drawer, something like that. And I am so glad you were with me. My brain has been going 100 miles an hour in the last couple of days. As you might know, we are in the midst of fires in Oregon and Washington, and it's just terrible. And we've got families that we've evacuated, or they've evacuated. And I'm hoping that by the time that this children's sermon is needed, that we have some control over the fires. I need your prayers. We need your prayers. So I appreciate your partnership in this ministry, and I know you're praying. That's one of those things I can really rest assured about. So this is for the narrative lectionary, and we are looking at Genesis 15, 1-6, and we're talking about God's promises. When you look up and you count the stars, and you can't even count them all, that's the numerous. That's how great the promises of God are. And this promise that's been given. And this children's sermon, really, I give thanks to Lowell Stein, a professor of mine at LBI, for when we studied the Pentateuch. And he walks in, and the image is great, and this is the springboard. The springboard is either a bag of sand or a bag of rocks, and Home Depot, Lowe's, the Dollar Tree has little bags of rocks that you can get. But so, Pastor Stein walks into the class. He's talking about here's the people of God. They're wandering in the desert. They're doing these things. All the stuff's happening, and he stops, and he looks down, and he takes off his shoe, and he pours sand out of his shoe. And what a wonderful image about where we're at, that God, the images of either the stars that you can see or the sand that gets in between your toes, or you're working in the garden and you've got all this dirt, these things that remind you of God's promise and God's grace, and that God holds you and that God is good. So I'm tying it into the stars in the sky and the sand. The other tie is the promise that we find in the waters of baptism, and that all of the ways that we can be reminded. The fact that we're washing our hands so often now, every time we wash our hands, we can be reminded of the promise of baptism. People said, when you say the Lord's Prayer, that's about the length of time it takes to wash your hands. So there's that reminder of God's grace and God's love. When you shower, when you take a bath, when you wash your face, when you are getting ready for dinner and you wash the vegetables, all these ways that we are reminded of God's grace and God's promise to us. So that's that springboard, that God's promises are so great that we can't even count them. They're so numerous. And that's the tie. So that's the springboard I'm going with. I'm recording this after the Revised Common Lectionary one, and so I'm a little bit more grounded. That was like stream of consciousness all over the place. But that's the springboard that I'm going with. Thank you so much for your partnership in this ministry, for your prayers and for your support. And with all of that, please keep us in prayer. Keep Oregon and Washington and the firefighters in your prayers. And we will see you next week. Thanks. Peace.